Good morning, everyone. We will begin in just a minute. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laura Whitlock, the Director of Marketing and Innovation at Watson Gloves. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today on demystifying biodegradation and the circular economy. We have two presenters today, Rodney Taylor and Christina Yeung. Rodney is the Director of Sales US for Watson Gloves and also serves on the Board of Trustees of the ISCA. Christina is the Product Development Manager at Watson Gloves and also serves on the ISCA Hand Protection Group. Lastly, I'd like to welcome Paul Wightman, who will also be helping us answer any questions at the end of the session. Paul is an expert in the sustainable plastics industry, specializing in developing innovative solutions to lessen the impact and harnessing potential of plastic waste. All right, Rodney, let's begin.
All right, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Really pleased to be joining my colleague, Christina Yeung, as well as Paul, to chat with you today about biodegradation, the circular economy, specifically related to industrial single-use gloves. Our agenda for today is we're going to talk about demand for sustainable products, waste management of rubber products, and then get into talking about what these terms really mean, like circular economy and biodegradation. We'll transition to talk about specifically where in the value chain these terms really start to have meaning with regard to industrial PPE. And then we'll kind of move into talking about what to look for, testing, validation, and then Christina is going to talk about product offerings. So with that, there is clearly increasing demand for sustainable products. The data is very clear. Sustainable product sales have increased 40% since 2014. That's a gain of almost $43 billion. Total sales of sustainable products are expected to pass $150 billion next year. And the demand for sustainable products is only expected to continue. And not only are companies profiting from sustainable offerings, it's interesting to see that more executives are being held accountable for sustainability initiatives. Today, 65% of senior managers are accountable for sustainability initiatives versus 45% just a few years ago, back in 2014. And I would just say this, for some more meaningful examples of sustainability commitments, really all you have to do is visit the websites for your customers or your customers' customers, depending on where you're positioned in the value chain. I mean, company websites across every market sector, across every company, regardless of size, are publishing sustainability, putting sustainability front and center. And for us, these are our customers and our customers' customers, and I would expect that you will find a similar dynamic. The next chart is a pretty busy chart, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I thought it was very interesting. On the y-axis, this chart is showing the percentage of companies that are claiming added profit from sustainability efforts, and this is by sector. And I think it's really interesting to see which sectors are profiting from sustainable offerings and products. And you see, consumer products, for example, that's to be expected. But we also see, interestingly, sectors like industrial goods, like energy and utilities, right next to consumer products at the top right of the chart, chemicals, automobiles. These are all really core industrial markets, and that's why I find this chart to be so interesting. And these really are our current, these are our target customers, and without a doubt, PPE will be in the mix. So what does all this mean? There's an increasing number of companies that are publicizing sustainability goals to achieve sustainability targets. It's going to take significant effort and expense for these companies to hit those sustainability targets. And at the same time, and I know you all are seeing this, and we certainly are, managers are expected to trim operating costs. So that means that managers are looking for sustainability wins that at the same time won't bust their budgets. And we believe that we have products and technologies that can help you meet this emerging need. Now, I don't have to tell any of you on this call that PPE has really kind of become a household term. I can remember a few years ago, I've been in the PPE business a long time, and I can remember a few years ago having to explain what PPE meant. And now everyone knows exactly what PPE is because it's being used so frequently in the media. But as PPE has become a household term and overall PPE usage has increased, you can't help but think all that PPE eventually becomes waste that likely ends up in a landfill. And this chart provides a view of the total volume of disposable gloves. 2019, 14 million tons consumed. And at some point, we do have to count the cost of the environment. And as a result, many manufacturers are already working hard to address the environmental impact of PPE with sustainable PPE offerings. Some examples would be gloves that are composed of fibers made from recycled water bottles. And Watson has been a leader in this area. There's been a lot of media coverage around disposable nitrile gloves as essential PPE for COVID response. Well, an interesting note, a typical nitrile glove will eventually make its way into a landfill. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but there, it's going to potentially take hundreds of years for that nitrile glove to decompose. We're making gloves that utilize the technology that facilitates degradation in just 15 years versus that 200 years, all without any loss in glove performance. And further, these gloves release biogas when they're decomposing that can be harnessed into energy in smart landfills. We also offer seamless knit gloves that utilize yarns that degrade in as quickly as 5 years versus the 50+ years for a typical glove that's made from synthetic materials. And so I say all this to say that we fully expect that sustainable PPE is going to be a long-standing industry trend. So on this next chart, let's kind of get back to rubber waste. In the U.S. alone, the waste disposal of rubber is over 15 billion pounds. And that's an increase of over 250% in the last 40 years, which is just astounding to think about. From a sustainability standpoint, it's a massive issue as rubber is a contaminant in current recycling streams. In 2007, 303 million scrap tires were generated in the U.S., and 2/3 were from passenger cars, and the remainder come from trucks and heavy equipment and aircraft and off-road and scrap vehicles. But tires aren't really biodegradable. The only economically viable option for the end of use is to reuse them, turning them into things like playground equipment and other products. Now disposable gloves are making their contribution to this non-biodegradable waste in their current form. So let's talk some about the circular economy. The basic premise behind the circular economy is that there's an all options on the table mindset and an all options on the table approach to looking at resources through a different lens to ensure that materials are cycling at the highest levels possible. And it all starts in the beginning. It all starts with design. In nature, when you're talking about circular economy, you got to look at what's happening in nature because nature's got it right. There's really no waste because everything gets recycled in nature. And this continual recycling and cycling of resources has supported life on this planet since its inception. And biodegradation is the process by which organic substances, meaning carbon-based substances, including you and me and everybody else, are broken down into smaller compounds using the enzymes produced by living microbial organisms. And although biodegradation processes vary, the final product, if you're looking on the right-hand side of this chart, the final product is most often carbon dioxide and or methane, soil, and water. And so to really achieve circularity, you have to ensure return on value. That's really the key. And it's not about how fast this process is happening, but where it's happening, specifically where it's happening in the value chain. In the U.S., 85% of municipal solid waste is being properly discarded, collected residentially, and it's then ultimately transferred to biologically active, anaerobically managed waste facilities. These facilities are designed to protect the environment. They're designed to reduce greenhouse gases and convert carbon-based waste into clean, renewable energy. So let's talk about what to look for. I want to talk a little bit about an organization who's really leading the way here in terms of thought leadership around sustainable waste. The background here is in 1994, industry leaders founded the National Solid Waste Management Association Foundation. They were really trying to focus on providing research into the waste industry. At that time, back in '94, that the research in the waste industry was so small that it was almost insignificant. But yet there was a huge information gap. As more and more people were becoming aware of the need for sustainable waste, there was just a real lack of information. And so these early leaders designed a foundation which could serve as a subsidiary and resource to the National Solid Waste Management Association. And then a few years later, in 1998, that board of directors voted to make that foundation independent of the trade association. And they renamed it the Environmental Research and Education Foundation. And so the Environmental Research and Education Foundation's mission is to provide funding, scientific research, and educational initiatives for waste management practices. And it's all about providing objective, science-based information on waste management. And so they've developed a design for discard program, D4D, and it's about taking an unbiased, science-based life cycle assessment of a product. And so we really rely heavily on information that's being provided by this organization because they really are at the forefront on thought leadership in this issue. And so today, this is what we have. These are the options that we have. We have recycling, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We have composting, and we have convert to energy. So let's now overlay rubber management in the waste system. And what we find is that reality is that recycling, as I said earlier, rubber is a contaminant in the recycle stream, so recycling is not an option. Rubber is really not composted. So the only real end-of-life alternative for rubber is converting to energy. And it's important to note that rubber products are destined for landfills. That's just a fact. That's where these products are going to end up. And so we have to think differently about how to handle rubber waste at this point in the value chain. It almost doesn't make sense to think about how we're going to address rubber waste at other points in the value chain. We really need to focus at this stage of the value chain and how we're going to address rubber waste. And so, I've come to learn a whole lot about landfills in the last year or so, and the science of landfills has really increased dramatically. Today's modern landfills are really, they're living, breathing organisms in a sense. They're stringently regulated, they're strictly managed, and they're designed to provide anaerobic or low oxygen environments and can lead to CH4 or methane, another name for methane, off-gassing. And that's important because this methane can be reclaimed as a source of clean, inexpensive energy. In fact, the Clean Air Act requires that all landfills reclaim methane and other greenhouse gases and either burn the gas or use it to create energy. And methane is utilized by corporate and governmental agencies to fulfill sustainability goals. So this is where this all kind of comes together. You kind of stop and think about this. We now have a new circular economy for rubber waste. And as we see in this chart, the gloves are worn, they're disposed at the point of use. They're then collected and transported to municipal landfills that are designed to generate off-gassing of methane as that trash decomposes. And that methane gas can be captured and used to generate clean energy. And it's really pretty amazing to think that trash placed in a landfill can be used to generate clean energy. Another way to think about it, I thought this statistic was fascinating. Every half ton of plastic waste could power a home for 2 years. Or another way to think of it is that half ton of plastic waste could fuel a vehicle for a year. I mean, it's really amazing to think about. And ultimately, you kind of get excited and start thinking, wow, imagine a world where communities are powered by the trash they throw away. And the really fascinating thing is the technology to do that is here now. Now, other sectors are pretty far down the road in this thinking, and really proud that Watson is leading the way for the industrial PPE sector. But the timing of the decomposition is key. As I mentioned earlier, if a glove takes 200 years to decompose, then you really lose the energy reclamation potential for a couple of generations, or lose it completely. And that's why the decomposition additive used in Watson Green Monkey gloves is so really critically important and represents a powerful market innovation. So I want to talk real briefly about biodegradation testing. And there are two primary tests for landfill biodegradation. One is ASTM D5511, and it's designed to provide quick results in an anaerobic environment. It's designed to validate if a material can convert to biogas in high heat, high moisture, no light, limited oxygen environments. The other test is ASTM D5526. And this is a more stringent, a longer term test in an anaerobic environment. And I think it's important to note that this test, the results are slower than ASTM D55, but more accurate to landfill performance. I kind of look at it this way. I think that D55 is almost like a screening test for the more strenuous D5520. D5511 is like a screening test for the more strenuous D5526. And that's my view, not the ASTM's messaging, but it's important because frankly, this testing is very expensive and suppliers are going to have to balance the value of the performance claim versus the high cost of testing. And so in that context, D5511 really becomes a minimum requirement, and then D5526 gives more real world results. And just a quick note, I think it's important to note that we are citing test methods from established and reputable test method providers like the ASTM, just like we have standards development organizations that create objective standards. We have third-party test method development organizations. Kind of think about it, the alternative would be every product supplier making claims based on their own standards and their own kind of hokey test methods. The ASTM, the American Society for Testing and Materials, is really the premier test method developer, frankly, in the world. And the ASTM develops voluntary consensus technical standards for a wide range of products. That is to say, they are the experts at test method development. Be careful when you hear biodegradation claims. You may hear claims from cheaper alternatives. I would encourage you, ask the supplier to share their ASTM test results. So that's just a little bit about test methods. I'm now going to hand over to Christina Yeung. She's going to talk about how we're leveraging innovative accelerated biodegradation material. So Christina, over to you.
Thanks so much, Rodney. And as you've mentioned, one of the main drivers for innovation at Watson Gloves is to bring new products to market with a focus on sustainability. So in the next few slides, we're going to share with you some current products we've launched with a focus on end of life and completing the circular economy that Rodney just talked about. And then we'll also be sharing with you a sneak peek of some of the other new sustainable products coming down the innovation pipeline. Next slide. Thank you. So some of you might be familiar with our line of landfill biodegradable disposable gloves under our Green Monkey brand. These gloves feature the Reclaim additive, which enhances the biodegradation in landfill conditions. And when compared to regular nitrile disposable gloves, the Green Monkey gloves will biodegrade in 8 to 11 years, compared to 200 plus years for a regular nitrile disposable glove. It's also important to note that the performance and shelf life of these gloves are not in any way affected by the Reclaim additive. There is absolutely no requirement for the user to change their behavior when they're using these gloves. The best part is they could be stored and used in the same fashion as our regular disposables. The only difference is, or actually the only thing the user has to do is just to ensure the gloves are disposed of properly so that they can end up in a landfill. Once in a landfill condition, the reclaim additive is then activated to attract microbes that then breaks down the glove while releasing enzymes. And the enzymes produce the biogas that can then be harnessed by the smart landfills and turned into energy. Next slide, Rodney. Thank you. So this slide basically shows how long it takes for a nitrile glove to degrade into biogas under various conditions. And here it really illustrates very clearly, especially in the blue bar, any of the gloves that do not have the reclaim additive can take up to 200 plus years, whereas even with just 1% of the reclaim additive in the polymer can greatly reduce the time that it takes to biodegrade in a landfill by about 8 to 11 years. So as Rodney mentioned, there is an optimal scenario for gloves to break down in a landfill. The conversion to biogas in a landfill must not take any sooner than 2 years, but less than 50 years to biodegrade. Again, when a material converts into biogas too quickly, it actually becomes a greenhouse gas and is wasted. But again, if it takes too long to degrade, then again, it is wasted because it cannot be harnessed by the smart landfills. So for this scenario, in a landfill, faster degradation is actually not better. There is an optimal time frame. So as Rodney mentioned, an increasing number of companies want to celebrate their sustainability accomplishments. And so to help them do that, we've developed a calculator to help quantify the energy equivalent savings achieved by using our Green Monkey gloves. And so here's briefly how it works. By inputting the customer's total glove units, the calculator provides an equivalent energy unit in BTUs, joules, and kilowatt hours. Those units can then be converted to equivalent energy usage examples like pounds of coal, gallons of gasoline, barrels of oil, the number of homes, average homes powered, and even dollar value of kilowatt hours. So the idea behind this calculator is actually to help our customers see tangible results from using our Green Monkey disposable gloves and how the energy is able to be converted in modern landfills. Now we're just going to switch gears and talk about some of the new products featuring enhanced biodegradability coming down the pipeline. New for spring 2021, we are featuring a fully biodegradable seamless knit glove. It is a 15-gauge, zero-waste biodegradable nylon yarn. Of course, it's very comfortable and offers great breathability. It has a foam nitrile palm coating that has reclaim additive for, again, that enhanced biodegradability. And the foam nitrile, of course, is excellent for wet and oily conditions. And currently, this glove is being tested for the ASTM D5511 biodegradation test, and we should be receiving test results by the end of the month. For the next slide here, we also have our 329 Jade. This, again, features our 15-gauge zero-waste biodegradable yarn and our foam nitrile coating. And if any of these products are of interest to you, please feel free to reach out to your local Watson rep, and they will be able to provide more information for you as well. So just to quickly summarize, our products that are reclaimed with our products that are engineered with the reclaim additive have the same performance and shelf life as our non-treated gloves. The enhanced biodegradation only starts when in landfill conditions. And it's key that you look for biodegradation testing results as cited under the ASTM D5511 or D5526. And we at Watson firmly believe that the future of PPE will be designed with sustainability in mind and with a focus on the circular economy. And that's definitely where we'll be putting our efforts for new product development. Now, we'll just move on to some questions and answers.
Perfect. So if you have any questions, please type them into the dashboard, and we'll be able to answer a few here. So the first question we have here is for Rodney. Rodney, is the Green Monkey calculator available to distributors and end users to use?
No, what we would like you to do is, if you're interested in trying to get some of the conversions that Christina mentioned in her presentation to understand how your purchases can relate to energy savings, to reach out to your Watson sales rep, and they can provide that content for you. The calculator is not going to be posted on our website for public use, but we want to make sure that the information is being facilitated appropriately through the Watson sales rep.
Great, thank you. And the next question here is for Paul. Paul, are all landfills smart or modern landfills designed to convert waste to energy?
A lot of them are. Most are. I mean, any landfill that's not is certainly heading that way. As Rodney pointed out, over 85% of municipal solid waste in the U.S. is going to smart landfills, sanitary landfills. In the United States, there's over 1,600 landfills, today's modern landfills, that control gases. More than half of those are converting those gases into energy. At the recent UN climate conference last year, there was 5 directives given to all governments around the world. And one of those directives was to manage landfills for the clean energy recovery value. I just got an email recently from a group in Kenya, because even in Kenya, they are converting their landfills so that they are sanitary landfills that can produce energy. So it's how we're managing solid waste today.
Great, thank you. This question will be for Christina. Does the user have to make special arrangements for the disposable of these gloves, or can they dispose of in their current usual manner?
Great question. Our biodegradable disposable gloves can be disposed of in the same manner as as regular disposable gloves. The most important point is to make sure you're disposing of them in your regular waste disposal that will end up in a landfill. The end goal here is for them to be in a landfill where they can start their biodegradation process.
Great, thank you. The next question here is for Rodney. Rodney, will the ISCA be adding a sustainable or biodegradable standard to the 105?
That's a good question. The ISCA is currently reviewing how they can insert sustainability performance requirements into a variety of different standards, 105 being one that's under consideration. I would say that it probably will be another couple of years before we see any modifications to 105 in this regard.
Great, thank you. The next question here for Paul. Paul, do Green Monkey nitrile gloves degrade faster in wet conditions compared to dry, or why do they biodegrade faster in wet conditions?
There's definitely going to be a variance in the times of biodegradation, because it's a natural process. It's a microbial process. Landfills vary. A landfill, say in Arizona, is going to have less moisture in it than, say, a managed landfill in Florida. One's definitely going to have more moisture. That's going to create a higher microbial process. So chances are, in a wetter environment, it will biodegrade faster. But like it was said before, as long as that biodegradation is happening in the time frame of that managed waste system, then the return value is captured, and that's the most important aspect.
Great, thank you. We have another question here. What is the current availability looking like for these gloves? Please contact your sales rep, and they'll be able to give you information on quantities available. Next question here for Christina. Are Green Monkey gloves compostable?
Actually, the Green Monkey gloves are not compostable. They are specifically engineered with the reclaim additive to degrade in an anaerobic environment versus composting, which is actually degradation through an aerobically composted environment. So the reclaim additive stays inert until very specific conditions that are specific to landfills in an anaerobic environment.
And especially just for Paul, I know that you're based out of the States, but do you know how many landfills in Canada are smart landfills? I guess most of them are modern landfills now.
Yeah, I would say most of them are. It would be if you have a garbage truck that comes to your house and picks up your garbage every week, then that garbage truck is probably taking that to a modern landfill that's a highly regulated, heavily managed system. So I always tell people, you know, a lot of times you will see garbage trucks today that say, you know, clean energy running on renewable fuel, natural gas. That natural gas is coming from a landfill that they're taking that trash to. So in Canada, they're definitely there. I know specifically even that Quebec is actually having an issue right now because they did not invest in their sanitary landfill system, and so they're actually having an issue now because of that. It's very rare to now see an unmanaged landfill. It's just not the way we're going to be managing waste.
Great. And let's take the time for one last question here. Rodney, why should we choose the ASTM D5511 test versus the ASTM D5526 test?
Yeah, as I said, I really kind of view ASTM D55 as almost a screening test for the more strenuous ASTM D5526. You can look at it this way. If you can pass ASTM D5511, then there's a high probability that you can pass D5526, but the opposite is certainly not true. If you can't pass D5511, there's no way you're going to pass D5526. The other piece to consider is that there is a legitimate cost associated, and they're quite expensive tests, 5526 being much more expensive. And so suppliers have to make some real business decisions around the value of that performance claim versus what that testing is going to do to the cost of the product. But I would say minimum requirement is D5511, and certainly look for that ASTM testing having been conducted on a product that's making a claim about biodegradation performance.
Great, thank you. And actually, one last question that came in here for Christina. Christina, any idea how the seamless knits with Reclaim will react when they get wet, dry, and then wet again? No chance of them starting to break down?
Yeah, that's correct. There is no chance of them starting to break down from day-to-day usage. Again, for us, it's very important that these products, the performance and the consumer behavior does not have to change. You can use them as you would any of the products that do not have the reclaim additive. The reclaim additive actually is inert until the product is properly disposed of, and only once in a landfill condition under very specific circumstances, which is, you know, as mentioned, with being deprived of light and oxygen and in certain moisture conditions, will the reclaim additive then be activated to start breaking down the gloves. But until then, when you're just using it for day-to-day, it will actually perform exactly the same as any other products that do not have the reclaim additive in it as well.
Great, thanks. And a follow-up question to that is, are the seamless knits available to purchase now?
They will be launching for spring of 2021 and are available for pre-booking currently. So please contact your Watson rep to be able to see some samples and to get some pre-booking orders in the system as well.
Great, thank you. And that concludes our webinar for today. I'd like to thank you all for joining us on a relatively new topic that has not been vastly discussed in the industrial industry, designing and using PPE with sustainability in mind. This webinar has been recorded and will be sent out shortly, but if you have any further questions, please reach out to your sales representative, or you can definitely email info@watsongloves.com as well, and we'll be able to answer your questions. Thank you to our presenters, Rodney, Christina, as well as Paul, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.